I found the text by accident. I wasn't snooping. I was just looking for a receipt on Jacob's phone, something to help me figure out why our card had been charged twice for groceries. And there it was. A message from my sister. Last night was even better than the first time. I still remember your hands while she was in labor. That was it. That was the message. My knees buckled. I remember grabbing the kitchen counter to steady myself, but it was too late. I hit the floor. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat there. My breath short, my face hot as sound inside my chest that didn't know how to come out. A few minutes later, I screamed. It was a scream that didn't sound like it came from me. And then I started sobbing. I was 61 years old, and I sobbed on my kitchen floor like I was a girl again. Like I had just been told my mother died. But this pain was worse. Because it wasn't death that hurt me. It was the people I loved most choosing each other over me. My sister. My husband. The night I gave birth to our third child. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip, because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself. I should have seen it, but I didn't. That's the truth. I wasn't blind. I was tired. I was pregnant with our third child. I had just turned 40. Jacob was working long hours, and Marlene had moved into the guest house 6 months earlier after her third stint in rehab. She had nowhere else to go. And I loved her. I loved her the way big sisters do, the kind of love where you'd break your own back just to carry their pain. She'd been lost her whole life. She made mistake after mistake, fell in with bad people, dated men who hit her, drank herself into oblivion, then cried into my arms when everything collapsed again. Every time I opened my door, every time I let her back in, Jacob didn't like it at first. He said Marlene was a drain on me, said I was too soft, said I was always mothering people who didn't deserve it. I thought he was just frustrated. I didn't realize not back then that what he saw in her wasn't a threat. It was a temptation. She was younger than me, prettier in that worn-out, tragic way. She had this way of laughing like she didn't care who was watching. And I think he got tired of being a family man, tired of stability, tired of being needed in the ways that matter. But I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that I was big tired and about to give birth again. The baby wasn't planned. We'd already had 2 beautiful boys, Michael and Eli. I thought we were done. But then came a night in January, a bottle of wine, and a positive test I kept secret for 2 days. When I told Jacob, he smiled. I thought it was joy. Now I wonder if it was something else. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was disappointment. Maybe it was just something I projected onto him because I needed to believe we were still us. The night I went into labor, Marlene drove me to the hospital because Jacob was stuck at work. He arrived 2 hours later, out of breath, smelling faintly of soap and cologne. Not his usual cologne, a different one. I remember it now, too clearly. He kissed my forehead, held my hand, told me I was strong. I delivered our baby girl just after midnight. She was perfect. She had my eyes, Jacob's mouth, and a full head of dark hair. I named her Abigail. I cried when I held her. And Jacob cried too. But now I wonder who he was crying for. I didn't learn about that night until nearly 2 decades later. That message from Marlene wasn't the first time they'd spoken like that. I scrolled back, hands shaking, scrolling through years of hidden threads. Some sexual, some sweet, some cruel. The worst one, Marlene calling me too blind to notice what's right under her nose. And Jacob replying with, "She always needed to be the hero. Let her." That was what broke me. Not the sex, not even the betrayal. It was the mockery, the contempt. I'd carried 3 children, held their secrets, saved my sister from overdosing in my own bathtub, nursed Jacob's mother through cancer, given everything, and they laughed about me like I was a joke. I didn't confront them that day. I closed the thread, sat at the kitchen table for hours. I made dinner. I smiled through it. I asked Jacob how his day was. I helped Eli with his taxes. I video called Abigail and told her I missed her. I acted like nothing had changed. But inside something had died, and something else had started to wake up. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and thought about everything I'd ever done for them, everything they'd stolen from me without asking. My time, my body, my trust, and now, my dignity. But I didn't cry again. Not after that first collapse. My tears were done. This wasn't going to be a story about a woman broken by betrayal. It was going to be a story about what happens when silence becomes power. What happens when the woman they thought they destroyed starts watching, starts remembering, starts preparing, because they thought I never noticed. They thought they got away with it. They were wrong. I was 9 years old when Marlene was born. I remember sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, holding her tiny hand, while Mama cried from exhaustion, and Daddy kept saying, "She's gonna be special, this one." I believed it. She was this fragile little thing with big brown eyes that never blinked long, always scanning, always searching. I used to think she was looking for me. She'd cry until I held her. And when she got older, she followed me everywhere, every room, every step, like my own little shadow. That bond stayed strong for most of my life. Even when it hurt me, I gave up a lot for Marlene. I didn't see it as sacrifice then, just love. When she turned 13 and got caught shoplifting, I lied and said it was me. When she snuck out at 15 and wrecked a boy's car, I stayed up with her until 3 in the morning while she sobbed and promised she'd change. Mama was dying by then, and Daddy couldn't handle her spirals. So I did. I became more than a sister. I was her protector, her cleanup crew, her safety net. And even when she cursed me, even when she told me I liked being the martyr, I never walked away. That's the thing about family. You think loyalty is enough. You think giving more than you have will fix the parts that are broken. But some people just take, and they learn how to smile while doing it. I met Jacob when I was 24. He was charming in that quiet way, the kind that doesn't overwhelm you with compliments, but makes you feel like you're the only woman in the room. We were both working the late shift at the university library. I was finishing my degree in early childhood education. He was doing accounting work and tutoring undergrad athletes. He liked how calm I was. I liked how grounded he seemed. He made me feel like I didn't have to solve everything alone. I'd been raising Marlene for years at that point. She was 16 and already showing signs of struggle, drinking, skipping class, running with older boys. Jacob saw it. He said I needed to set boundaries. But when I told him about her, about our family, he didn't run. He pulled me in closer. He told me I was strong, that I'd carried too much for too long, and that he wanted to carry me for once. I fell hard. We got married a year later. Nothing fancy. A courthouse wedding, 3 friends, and Marlene in a borrowed dress standing by my side. She gave a toast afterward, nervous and messy but heartfelt. She called Jacob the only man who ever made my sister stop apologizing for being too good. That line stuck with me for years. It stuck with me because it was true. For a long time, Jacob made me feel like I didn't have to earn love. like I could just be, and that was everything. The first few years were good, better than good. We bought a small house near the lake. I got a teaching job. He moved into a firm downtown. We had Michael a year later, then Eli 2 years after that. Life was full. Not perfect, no, but solid. We made schedules, paid bills, argued over paint colors and bedtime routines. The kind of life you build with sweat and small wins. Marlene drifted in and out during those years. Sometimes she'd disappear for months, then show up unannounced, needing money or a place to stay. Jacob tolerated it. Sometimes he even offered to help setting up interviews, finding rehab programs. I saw it as kindness. I saw it as a man who loved me enough to love the people I refused to give up on. And Marlene? Well, she'd stay just long enough to be okay, then vanish again. It wasn't until her third rehab that she really tried to clean up. That's when she moved into the guest house behind our home. I didn't even ask Jacob before I told her she could stay. I just did it. He didn't protest. Just gave me that tight smile and said, "Okay, but this is the last time, Grace. She's got to stand on her own feet someday." I nodded. I believed he meant it. I believed we were still on the same side, but something changed after that. Looking back, I think it started with the little things. The way Marlene would linger in the kitchen when Jacob was making coffee. The way Jacob stopped coming to bed at the same time as me. They joked a lot. Laughed at things I wasn't part of. I'd come in, and the air would change. Just slightly. I felt it, but I told myself it was nothing. Because by then, I was pregnant again. 40 and pregnant. I should have been scared, but I wasn't. I saw it as a blessing. A second chance to raise a daughter. I imagined dressing her in soft pinks, taking her to story hour, brushing her hair, while she sat at my vanity. It felt like God was giving me something new to hold on to. I didn't tell Marlene right away. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to keep the joy to myself. Maybe I didn't want her to turn it into another crisis. But when I finally told her, she hugged me. Hard, almost too long. She whispered, "You always get everything," but she smiled when she said it. I took it as a joke. The pregnancy was harder than the others. I was exhausted all the time. My back hurt, my ankles swelled. Jacob was patient, but distant. He stayed late at work more. Said he was under pressure with a new client. I didn't argue. I figured he was trying to keep us afloat. But the truth was, I felt more alone than I'd ever been in our marriage. Marlene, on the other hand, became my shadow again. She'd cook meals, rub lotion on my feet, do the laundry. She'd sit next to me and play with my hair while I drifted off on the couch. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Healing, even. The sister I'd loved coming back to me. Now I know what she was doing. She wasn't comforting me. She was positioning herself. She was waiting for me to be at my weakest. And then, she took him. It started with the wine glass. That's the first thing I remember not adding up. I came home from a doctor's appointment, 3rd trimester, checkup, swollen feet, mild sciatica, and as I walked into the kitchen, I noticed 2 wine glasses drying in the rack. That might sound small, but I hadn't had wine in months, and Jacob didn't drink wine, not even socially. He was a whiskey man, always had been. "So who were the glasses for?" I asked lightly. "Company today." Marlene looked up from her phone and smiled like I was being silly. "Oh, I poured myself a glass and left it out. Poured another for you out of habit, but dumped it when I remembered your no alcohol rule." She even did air quotes when she said it, laughing a little. I smiled. I nodded. I let it go, but it stuck with me. From that moment on, I started noticing things. Small but loud in my gut. Her perfume would linger in the hallway long after she went outside. That same perfume I used to love now started to make me feel sick. I caught Jacob looking at her once, just a glance, but the kind of glance you don't give someone you consider family. And then there were the silences, the ones that felt too rehearsed, too synchronized, like I had walked in on something they were too practiced at hiding. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m., and Jacob wasn't in bed. I wandered the house in the dark quietly, because I didn't want to wake the boys. His car was still in the driveway. I checked the kitchen, the den, even the garage. Nothing. Then I saw light spilling from the back window of the guest house. It was faint, just the soft glow of a TV, or maybe a lamp, but I froze. I stood there in the hallway, my hand on the doorknob leading outside. And I told myself not to go. Told myself it would just be more lies, more made-up reasons. I turned around, went back to bed, and stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night. I didn't have proof. I didn't have video or photos or witnesses, but I knew. A woman knows. You spend decades learning a person how they breathe when they lie, how their voice gets soft when they're hiding something, how their patterns change when they're falling for someone else. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't hormonal. I was betrayed. The next morning, Jacob made me breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast fruit. He even cut the crust off the bread like he used to do when I was pregnant with Michael. He was overly cheerful, kissing my shoulder, telling me I was glowing. And I smiled. I played my part. Because even then, I wasn't ready to believe the truth. Because believing it would mean something I wasn't sure I could survive, that my sister and my husband were using my kindness as cover. I spent the next few weeks sleepwalking, taking care of the boys, going to appointments, pretending the house I had built was still a home. Marlene stayed close. Too close. Always touching my belly. Always asking how I was feeling. Always watching Jacob when he entered the room. One day, I asked her, half joking, half serious, "You're not sweet on my husband, are you?" I remember her face. She didn't flinch. She laughed, reached over and touched my hand. "Grace, you always think someone's after your perfect little life. No one wants what you have. Trust me." I laughed with her. But that night, I cried in the shower for 25 minutes, biting my fist so the boys wouldn't hear. Then came the night of the birth. My water broke at 4:12 p.m. Jacob was supposed to be home by then, but he texted saying he was stuck at the office dealing with a last-minute audit. Marlene rushed me to the hospital. She held my hand the entire ride, telling me I was strong, telling me I was beautiful, telling me the baby was going to be just like her big sister. I didn't know how to feel about that. We got to the hospital, and the contractions were coming fast. Nurses, monitors, IVs, the usual chaos. Marlene stayed beside me the entire time. But just before I started pushing, she stepped out to get coffee. That's what she said. "I'll be back before she arrives." Jacob walked in 10 minutes later, breathless and full of excuses. He kissed my forehead like always, held my hand like always, told me to breathe, told me to push. When Abigail arrived, he cried. He kissed me. He told me I was amazing. Later, the nurse asked where my sister had gone. I realized she never came back. She didn't hold the baby. She didn't come to the room. She sent a text saying she didn't want to overwhelm me and would visit in the morning. Now I know why. Because while I was in a hospital bed, bleeding and weeping and holding a newborn girl to my chest, they were together. That was the night their affair began. Or maybe it had begun long before, and that was the night they stopped pretending to feel guilty. I didn't learn the truth until years later, but something inside me knew it then. That night, I felt a shift I couldn't name, a silence deeper than usual. I remember holding Abigail and whispering, "Don't trust people too easily." She looked up at me, just hours old. I thought it was about life, but it was about them. It was about what was already happening while I lay there vulnerable and full of love. People talk about betrayal like it's one event, a sharp knife, one moment. But it's not. It's a slow rot. It's silence. It's side glances. It's wine glasses drying beside the sink. It's laughter behind closed doors. It's coffee runs that last too long. It's your sister saying she'd never do that to you. And your husband saying he loves you while he's lying to your face. And it's the moment you realize you believed both of them. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I didn't even cry, not after that first night. That first wave of pain nearly drowned me, but after it passed, I was calm. Scarily calm. There's something about long betrayal that doesn't burn hot. It freezes you, numbs you, makes every smile, every word you hear afterward feel like it's passing through glass. That was me. Frozen. Quiet. Watching. They didn't know I knew. That's the part that gave me power. That first night on the kitchen floor with Jacob's phone in my hand, I could have stormed into our bedroom and thrown it at his face. I could have called Marlene and ripped her apart with words. But I didn't. I sat at that table for hours rereading every message. Every moment they thought was hidden. Every dirty little confession. Every inside joke about me. I memorized them. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to. The next morning, I made pancakes. Blueberry Jacob's favorite. He walked in, kissed my cheek like always, and said, "You're spoiling me, babe." And I smiled. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. I watched him pour his coffee. I watched him check his email. I watched him lie. I didn't flinch. I called Marlene around noon, told her to come by for dinner, told her Abigail had been asking about her. She said she'd love to, said she missed us. Her voice was sunshine. I wanted to see her face, wanted to see how well she could lie in person. That night she walked through the front door like she owned it, like she was still my sister, like she hadn't gutted me on the most important night of my life. She hugged me long, too long. That was her thing. Those clingy, dramatic embraces. She buried her face into my shoulder and whispered, "You look so tired, sis." And I whispered back, "So do you." She pulled away and laughed. I didn't. At dinner, I watched them carefully. Not the obvious way. I watched the glances, the pauses, the way she picked at her food like she was waiting for something. I noticed how he refilled her wine glass before she asked, how she touched his arm when she laughed. Small things, things that would look innocent to anyone else. But to me, they were signs, markers, reminders that I was the one sitting at the wrong table in my own home. Abigail was 17 then. Michael was already out of the house, and Eli had just started college. The house was quieter than it used to be. Too quiet, and I realized that's how they survived so long, in the spaces left behind, in the empty rooms, in the trust I gave freely because I thought I was loved. But I wasn't going to be their fool anymore. That week, I started moving things, slowly, quietly. The joint bank accounts I transferred most of my savings to a private account Jacob didn't know existed. It was under my maiden name. Something I'd opened years ago when we were first married just in case. I never touched it much. But now it would be mine again. I called a lawyer, a woman named Lena recommended by a friend from church who'd gone through a messy divorce. I didn't say everything, just told her I was considering options and wanted to know what protections I had in case things went south. She was sharp, smart. Told me to get copies of everything, deeds, titles, account statements. Told me not to confront him yet. Told me to watch. So I did. I also called a therapist. Not for them. For me. Her name was Dr. Elaine Pierce. She had soft eyes and a voice like sandpaper and honey. She didn't gasp when I told her what I'd read. She didn't try to fix me. She just listened. And every week, I'd sit in that pale blue office and pour out every ugly piece of truth I'd kept locked up for too long. I told her about Marlene, about the shoplifting, the overdose, the men. I told her about Jacob, the slow decline, the nights I lay awake pretending I wasn't alone in that bed. I told her about the day I gave birth, and she said something I'll never forget. She said grace betrayal doesn't make you weak. It makes you aware. And once you're aware, you decide who you want to become. So, I decided. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to scream and break dishes and kick them out. That would give them drama. That would make me look unstable. No. I was going to make them comfortable, safe. Let them believe they'd gotten away with it. Let them believe I was still in the dark. That's how I'd win. I started writing everything down. Times, dates, messages. I took pictures, saved emails, backed up the phone to my laptop. I created a folder on a flash drive and labeled it For Me. I made a second one called Insurance. I hid it inside a hollowed-out cookbook on the bottom shelf. Just in case. Jacob started traveling more. Marlene stopped pretending to date anyone. They thought I didn't notice. But I did. And every time they laughed a little too hard, every time I caught him lingering at the window toward the guest house, I smiled. Because I was the only one who knew what was coming. And I was going to take my time. The real proof came by accident. I was organizing a box of old paperwork one morning, birth certificates, tax documents, old report cards the kids had forgotten to take with them, and I found an envelope taped to the bottom. It was thin, cream-colored, unmarked. I opened it curious. Inside was a letter. Not addressed to me, not signed. Just a printed page of longing, of guilt, of confessions that weren't meant to be found. The language was careful, but the meaning was clear. I've never known a touch that made me forget myself like yours. That night in November changed me. I saw the way she cried, and I hated that I didn't feel anything. Just heat. Just you. The letter had no names, but I didn't need them. November, the birth, my sister, my husband. There it was. Written proof. I sat there in my bedroom with the letter in my lap, fingers trembling. I didn't cry. That part of me had dried up weeks ago. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was focus. Sharp, cold focus. The kind you get when you realize someone has been building their life on top of your grave, and it's time to make sure they feel the dirt falling back onto them. That's when I knew what I needed to do. It wouldn't be enough to cut them off. I needed to shift the ground under them, quietly, permanently. The first thing I did was go to the bank. I changed the beneficiary of my life insurance policy, removed Jacob, added each of the kids separately with Abigail getting the largest share. I didn't tell anyone, just smiled at the clerk and said estate planning. I walked out of there feeling 10 pounds lighter. Next, I hired a second attorney, this one for asset separation. A man named Randall, who specialized in high net worth divorce planning. He asked, "Is this reactionary or strategic?" I smiled and said, "It's quiet." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. Over the next 3 months, I moved slowly. I took Jacob off the deed to the lake house. Legally, it had been in both our names, but the purchase had been made with money I inherited from my grandmother before we married. It was a technicality, but enough to shift the title. I also started shifting ownership of a few stocks I held under my name into an LLC I created with only one member, me. I kept a calendar, a detailed one. Every visit Jacob made to the guest house, every excuse Marlene gave for canceling dinner or being too tired to come by. I noted the evenings Jacob came home late, smelling of her perfume. I logged it all. Abigail visited more during that time. She was finishing her first year at university only an hour away, and she'd drop in to do laundry or talk, or just lay her head in my lap like she used to when she was little. Those were the moments that kept me steady. Her innocence, her laughter, the way she still saw the world as good and decent. I protected that. I didn't want her to carry this with me. Not yet. But the truth was, I was changing. Not in a way anyone else could see but inside. The woman who used to hold everyone's broken pieces, she was gone. The one left behind was building something else entirely. I started going through old photos. Not out of nostalgia, out of calculation. I remembered Jacob had once stored old phones in a shoebox in the closet. Phones he'd never thrown away. Most people don't wipe them. They just forget. I charged the one from 5 years ago. Password was Easy Michael's birthday. Inside were dozens of texts, photos, voice notes, and there it was again. Marlene's voice, her laugh. A video of the two of them on a boat, the lake behind them, Jacob filming while she smiled into the sun saying, "If she ever finds out we're dead." And Jacob replying, "She won't. She trusts us." I downloaded everything, uploaded it to the same flash drive. And I made 3 copies. One went into a safe deposit box I opened at a bank across town. Another into a waterproof envelope under a floorboard in my closet. The third I mailed to myself, registered sealed with instructions to be held at the post office in case of a legal incident. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was writing my own escape route. The final piece came when I started visiting a financial advisor separate from Jacob's. A woman named Tasha. I told her I was planning to retire early and wanted to ensure my children were protected. She walked me through trust estate planning and silent transfers. I set up a trust for each child. I named myself trustee. I scheduled everything to activate with a simple signature. It was done, just waiting. Then I did something I didn't expect. I wrote a letter, one for Jacob, one for Marlene. Not angry letters, not cruel, just true. I wrote about how it felt to love them both, about the years I gave, the moments I carried alone, the dreams I built for all of us. And I ended both letters with the same line, "I loved you until it cost me myself." I sealed them, dated them, and waited. What they didn't know is that I wasn't broken anymore. I was awake, and I was preparing the ground beneath their feet to disappear. The first real crack in Jacob came with the layoff. His firm downsized in March. I remember the phone call. He came home early, shoulders heavy, jacket still in his hand, and said, "I'm out," after 15 years. I watched his mouth move, but I didn't feel sorry for him. Not like before. I felt ready. Like a domino had fallen right where I needed it to. He paced the living room for an hour, ranting about loyalty, about how he gave everything to that company. I sat quietly on the sofa, nodding, offering sympathetic words like a good wife. But inside, I was calm. He was about to understand what it felt like to lose control, to lose certainty. I offered to help him rework the budget. "We'll be okay," I said. "We've always been okay." And he believed me. Because that's who I had always been, the one who fixed it. The one who made it okay. But I wasn't fixing it for him this time. I was letting the weight fall exactly where it belonged. Marlene showed up more after that. Not officially, just small visits. She'd bring casseroles, act concerned, drop hints about knowing people at small firms who could help Jacob. She wore tighter tops, softer lipstick. She hugged him longer. I watched her with the detachment of someone studying a parasite. She wasn't just feeding off him. She was feeding off us, our family, our history, my silence. And Jacob, he lapped it up. like a man who believed his secret was safe, like a man who forgot that the person he was betraying had eyes and ears and memory. He started leaning on me again, and that made it easier to feed him comfort, to keep him from sensing the shift. "We'll get through this," I said. "You need time to think. Maybe even take a break." He took my words like a blessing. He had no idea they were a blueprint for his own unraveling. I encouraged him to relax, to spend time at the lake. "Take the boat out," I said. "Clear your head." He did. And every time he was gone, I worked. On the estate, on the trusts, on the letters I was writing to each of our children, letters they wouldn't read until I was gone. Honest ones. Not cruel, but clear. Abigail came home for summer. She was glowing, newly in love, full of plans, talking about switching her major from psychology to social work. I listened to her for hours some nights. She reminded me of the woman I used to be, hopeful, certain, soft in all the right ways. One night, while we were washing dishes, she said Dad and Aunt Marlene seem close again. My hands froze in the water. I turned my head. "Why do you say that?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Just, they always laugh when they think no one's looking. It's weird." That moment stayed with me. It meant I wasn't crazy. It meant the pattern was visible, even if the details were still in shadow. I kept planting seeds, encouraging Jacob to reconnect with old friends, to explore freelance work, to take time for himself. I knew the more freedom he had, the more mistakes he'd make. The more relaxed he felt, the less careful he'd be. I was right. One evening, I came home earlier than expected from the grocery store. He didn't hear me come in. I saw his car. I saw the guest house door slightly open. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I just walked to the side of the house and waited. 3 minutes later, they emerged. Marlene fixed her hair. Jacob tucked in his shirt. He saw me and flinched. I smiled. "Groceries are in the car. Could use a hand." They both jumped to help. Marlene made a joke about sneaky shopping. Jacob kissed my cheek. I stood in the kitchen and made chicken salad while they danced around each other, pretending it hadn't happened. But now, I had witnessed it, and that changed everything. 2 days later, I met with Randall again. I signed the final paperwork for asset separation. My accounts were no longer shared. My name was the only one on the properties. I initiated a post-nuptial document carefully worded, legally binding. Jacob signed it without reading, grateful for what I framed as financial clarity during a stressful time. That document would later protect every dollar I had from him. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ahead. And that feeling? It was addictive. I started walking with my head higher. My voice grew firmer. My eyes didn't avoid theirs. They didn't know why. But they felt it. The shift. The power leaving their hands. They could feel the ground starting to tilt. One night, Jacob asked me, "Are you okay?" "You've been distant." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I'm better than I've been in years." He smiled. "Good." I was worried. I said nothing. Just walked away, because worry was only beginning to knock on his door. He came to me in tears. That's how the confrontation began, not with shouting, not with fists through walls, or doors slammed in rage. No, Jacob came into our bedroom one evening, holding his phone, cheeks red, eyes puffy, like a child caught doing something he swore he'd never do again. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, folding laundry, already knowing what he was about to say. I'd been waiting. I didn't plan the moment, but I had paved the road to it. Quietly. Every day. One grain of sand at a time. And now, the tide was rolling in. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice shaking. I didn't flinch. "Okay." He sat down on the ottoman, head in his hands. This is going to destroy everything. I know it will, but I can't keep carrying it. Still, I stayed quiet. I wanted him to say it in his own words. I needed to hear how he'd frame it. Needed to hear whether he'd speak like a man full of guilt or a man trying to make himself feel better. He finally looked up at me, eyes glassy. I slept with Marlene. It happened a long time ago, the night Abby was born. That sentence should have knocked the breath out of me. But it didn't, because I'd already grieved it. I'd already sat with the truth in every room of this house. I'd already imagined every version of this confession, and now it was here. Ugly, weak, real. He kept talking. It was just once. At first, I was scared. You were in labor, I wasn't thinking clearly. She kissed me. I didn't stop it. I hated myself after, but then it kept happening. I didn't plan for it. He broke down. It just got out of control. I let him sit in it for a while. Let the silence fill the room. Then I said, "You weren't scared, Jacob. You were selfish." My voice was calm, level. I was in a hospital bed giving life to your daughter, and you were with my sister. That's not fear. That's a choice. He sobbed harder. He reached for my hand. I pulled it back. He whispered, "I'm so sorry. I don't know who I was. I hated myself every day. I swear to God, Grace, I ended it." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, you didn't. You just stopped feeling guilty." He buried his face in his hands, and then he said something I didn't expect. "I think I wanted you to find out. I couldn't carry it anymore." And there it was. The final insult. He didn't confess because of love, or respect, or even shame. He confessed because the burden got too heavy for him, because he wanted to pass it to me. I stood up, walked to the window. The guest house light was on. Of course it was. I stared at it for a long moment. "She knew I would forgive her," I said. "That's what makes her dangerous. But you knew I would forgive you too. You counted on it." He said nothing. The silence between us was decades long. "I've loved you since I was 24, I continued. I gave you children. Gave you my whole life. And when I needed you most, when I was in the most vulnerable moment, a woman can be, you abandoned me for the one person I spent my life protecting." He stood, walked toward me. "I'll do anything, Grace. Anything. Please. I want to fix this." I turned to face him. "You can't fix this, because you broke it too far back. You broke it the night you thought I wouldn't notice." He dropped to his knees, cried into my stomach like a child. And still, I didn't comfort him. Not because I hated him, but because something had finally shifted inside me. I didn't feel sorry for him anymore. I didn't want to save him. "You need to leave," I said. He looked up confused. "What? I've already prepared everything. The accounts are separated. The house is in my name. You'll get enough to restart somewhere." "But you're leaving. Tonight." The shock on his face was almost comical. "You planned this?" "Yes," I said, "for months. Because I knew you'd never tell the truth unless your back was against the wall." He stood slowly. "What about the kids? They'll know, in time. And I'll tell them the truth. Not to punish you, but because they deserve to understand why everything feels different." He stumbled out of the room like a man freshly orphaned. I heard the front door open, then close. I didn't check where he went. The next morning, Marlene called. I didn't answer. The next day, she showed up. I opened the door, let her inside. She stood there, hair messy, eyes wild. "Why'd you do it?" she asked. "Why now? You mean Why didn't I do it sooner? She laughed bitterly. You always think you're so righteous. I tilted my head. No, Marlene. I just stopped pretending you were worth my silence. She paced. She tried to spin it, tried to cry. You don't know what it was like being your sister. You were always the strong one, the smart one, the one everyone loved. I was nothing. Jacob saw me. No, I said. He used you, and you let him, because hurting me made you feel powerful. She stopped moving. I loved him, and I loved both of you, I said. That's the difference. She tried to hug me. I stepped back. You're not welcome here anymore. She stared at me, stunned. You're really cutting me off. No, Marlene. You cut yourself off. I'm just closing the door you left open for too long. She walked out without another word. I closed the door behind her, locked it, and I stood there, in the quiet, in the ruin. But I wasn't broken. I was clean. The house was quieter than I'd ever known it. No footsteps from the guest house. No slamming car doors. No voices downstairs arguing over coffee preferences or schedules. Just silence. A silence that used to scare me. But now, it felt like breath, like stillness after a long, choking storm. Jacob had packed his things that night, sloppy confused, grabbing whatever he could from the closet like a man being chased. I didn't watch him go. I sat at the kitchen table and drank a cup of tea while the man I had once imagined growing old with quietly erased himself from the corners of our life. The kids took it differently. Michael, my oldest, called the moment he heard. You kicked Dad out. His voice was tight, angry. What happened? I told him we'd grown apart, that I couldn't keep living in pretense. I didn't tell him about Marlene. Not yet. He had just had his first child, a daughter. I didn't want to poison his joy with the truth of what his father had done. Eli. He was quieter. He came over, sat on the back porch with me and asked, Is this about something he did? I looked at him, trying to measure how much of the man his father had been still lived inside him. Yes, I said, but it's also about what I allowed. He nodded. You always carried more than you let on, and I loved him for that, for not pushing, for seeing me. Abigail. She was the one I dreaded telling the most. I waited until she came home for the weekend. We went for a walk. Her hand looped through my arm like she used to do as a little girl. We reached the lake, and I sat her down on the bench under the old willow. The place I used to bring her when she was small, when she had nightmares, or scraped knees, or big questions about things I couldn't always answer. Abby, I said, there's something I need you to know. She looked up at me, those same soft brown eyes I'd stared into the night she was born. Is this about Dad? I nodded. It's also about Aunt Marlene. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? So I told her. Not everything. Not the texts or the wine glasses or the night I gave birth. Just the core, the betrayal, that it had gone on for years, that I'd known, that I'd chosen to handle it without war, without spectacle, but that it was over, that they were both out of my life, for good. She didn't cry. She just stared at the water for a long time. Then she said, I always thought she was too close to him. I just thought I was being paranoid. You weren't, I whispered. She leaned into me, rested her head on my shoulder. I'm sorry you went through it alone. I had to, I said, to make it through in one piece. She was quiet for a while, then asked, Do you still love him? It was the question I hadn't asked myself in weeks. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the water, the wind, the sky. I don't think so, I said finally. I think I loved who he pretended to be. I think I loved who I was when I was with him. And maybe I mourned that more than I mourned him. She nodded. Are you going to be okay? I already am, I said. But that wasn't entirely true. Because healing doesn't happen all at once. It comes in pieces, in waves, in unexpected moments. Like when I found the old birthday card from Marlene tucked inside a box of Abby's baby clothes. You're the best sister in the world. I don't deserve you, but I'm glad you keep loving me anyway. I read it, and for the first time in months, I cried. Not because I missed her, but because that line had been true. I had loved her longer and harder than she ever deserved, and I'd finally stopped. Or when I found Jacob's watch in the drawer where he always left it still ticking, still wound as if he planned to return. I held it in my palm, felt its weight. Then I put it in a box with other pieces I no longer needed. I didn't throw it out. I just didn't want it near me anymore. Dr. Pierce, my therapist, told me I was entering post-traumatic clarity. She said that sometimes when a person finally stops carrying what was killing them, they start seeing everything with brutal honesty. And that's what it felt like my eyes were wide open for the first time in years. I saw the corners I had swept pain into, the rooms where I had let resentment bloom quietly, the ways I had made myself small to protect people who wouldn't spit on me if I was on fire. And I saw something else. Freedom. It was quiet. It didn't announce itself with balloons or confetti. It came in the form of quiet mornings, clean sheets, a porch that didn't carry the echo of betrayal. It came in the way Abigail started calling just to say she loved me. In the way Eli offered to help with yard work without being asked. In the way Michael started asking questions, not demanding answers, just trying to understand. And slowly, I started to rebuild. Not just the house, not just the paperwork, me. I started taking walks again, started baking for no one but myself. I bought new furniture for the guest house, soft, inviting, warm. Turned it into a retreat, a space for art-reading solitude, a space that no longer smelled like lies. I deleted Marlene's number, blocked her on every device, returned a box of her things to the address she left behind. No note, no drama, just finality. As for Jacob, he reached out twice. Once with a text. I miss you. Once with a letter. Handwritten, apologizing, begging for a second chance. I didn't respond to either, because closure doesn't come from the people who break you. It comes when you stop waiting for them to make it right. I didn't need them to make it right. I had already done that myself. It was strange the way people started looking at me differently. Not just family, neighbors, friends, even the women from church. There's a certain kind of shift in people's eyes when they hear a woman left her husband after decades. It's not pity. Not always. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's admiration they don't know how to say out loud. But mostly, it's curiosity. As if they're trying to read the fine print of your soul, figure out how you crossed that invisible line between staying and walking away. I didn't offer explanations. I didn't gossip. I just moved forward. Quietly, the house grew warmer again. I started opening the windows more, letting the breeze back in. I played music in the kitchen, lit candles in the evening, sat on the porch and watched the light shift across the yard like time itself was healing me. And in some small, slow way, it was. The boys came over more often. Michael brought his wife and their baby. Eli would drive in and help fix things, gutters, appliances, whatever gave him an excuse to stay longer. I could feel it in them, the way they were trying to protect me, even without knowing the full truth. Abigail was the only one I trusted with everything. She came by late one evening, a bottle of sparkling water in one hand, her journal in the other. She liked to write while I crocheted. We didn't talk much that night, just sat beside each other in a soft, quiet peace. Then she said, without looking up, "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I kept stitching, pulled the yarn tight. Maybe. But forgiveness isn't always a door you open for someone else. Sometimes it's just a window you crack for yourself, letting out the poison, letting in the air. She nodded. "Did you ever want revenge?" I paused, looked at her. I wanted them to feel what they made me feel. I wanted them to wake up one day and realize they'd burned down the only house that ever took them in. Her voice was soft. "And did they? I think so," I said. "But the real justice, it's silence. It's being forgotten. It's knowing that life moved on, without you in it." A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. But the handwriting was familiar. It was from Marlene. She wrote 4 pages, most of it rambling. Memories from our childhood. Apologies tucked between justifications. "I didn't mean to hurt you" was in there 3 different times. And that one line she always used when her life collapsed, "You are always stronger than me, Grace." I folded the letter carefully, put it in a box in the attic. I didn't need it. I didn't need to write back, because I knew what she really wanted. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted to be seen again, heard, acknowledged, but I'd already erased her from the story I was living now. Jacob sent an email weeks later. Just one line, "I still love you." I marked it as read, then archived it. I didn't block him. That would have meant I still cared. In therapy, I talked less about the betrayal and more about what came after. The strange lightness that follows the heaviest grief. The relief of not having to pretend anymore. Dr. Pierce said something that stuck with me. When you stop holding the ceiling up for everyone else, you finally get to stand on solid ground. That's what it felt like. Like I'd been carrying a crumbling roof over their heads for so long, I forgot what it meant to live in a home where nothing was leaking. Nothing was waiting to collapse. I started writing again. Not stories, letters. To myself. I called them truth pages. I wrote about the hospital, about the wine glasses, about the first time Jacob touched Marlene's hand in front of me and I didn't say a word. About the moment I realized silence wasn't peace, it was sacrifice. And I had sacrificed too much. I wrote letters to my younger self, to the woman who thought love meant loyalty no matter the cost, to the woman who carried her sister's shame like it was a birthright, to the mother who thought holding a family together meant holding in the truth. Each letter ended the same way: "You were worth protecting." Even from them. I burned them one night in the fire pit out back. Not as a ritual, just as a release. I watched the pages curl and blacken turn to ash, and I felt lighter. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need them to suffer. What I needed was room. Room to grow. Room to breathe. Room to live the years I still had left. I started traveling. Small trips at first. A bed and breakfast by the ocean. A retreat in the mountains. Then longer ones out west up north. I walked along lakesides and under pines, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about who needed me back home. I didn't abandon my kids. I didn't disappear. But I stopped apologizing for wanting space. I stopped shrinking. I planted a garden that spring. Not for beauty, but for purpose. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs. I worked the soil with bare hands, got dirt under my nails, watched things grow that I had started with my own 2 hands. It healed something in me. People think justice is loud, courtrooms, showdowns, viral moments. But real justice. It's quiet. It's sitting in your own house with the windows open, knowing no one can hurt you there. It's drinking your coffee without checking over your shoulder. It's being able to look in the mirror and say, I chose me, and I did. Finally. I found the first letter in an old box of Abigail's baby clothes, tucked beneath a worn pink sleeper and a yellow knit hat my mother made before she passed. It was folded neatly sealed in an envelope addressed to no one, my handwriting, shaky, older ink. I held it for a moment confused, then remembered. I had written it in the hospital, the night she was born. I sat down on the edge of my bed and opened it slowly. The paper had yellowed slightly. The creases deep. The words, they brought me to tears before I finished the first paragraph. If you're reading this, Grace, it means you forgot to forget. You forgot that your life still belongs to you. That even after heartbreak, especially after heartbreak, your heart is still yours. You are not just a wife, not just a sister, not just a mother. You are a woman, and you deserve to feel whole. I had written those words to myself in a hospital bed hours after Abigail arrived. My body sore, my spirit split wide open. Jacob had already left the room claiming work. Marlene never showed up. I had felt a loneliness I couldn't explain then. I understand it now. I wasn't just lonely, I was being erased. I kept reading. You think you're strong because you keep everything together. But real strength is walking away from what breaks you. You already know this. You've always known. Don't wait until it's too late to live without lies. I folded the letter back, carefully pressed it against my chest, and cried. Not because it hurt, but because it was kind. Because it was the voice of the woman I had been before the silence swallowed me. That letter unlocked something. The next morning, I pulled down a storage bin from the closet. Inside were all the letters I had written over the years. To myself, to no one. Pages from notebooks. Torn receipts with confessions scribbled on the back. Angry words, honest ones. Some from when the kids were little. Some from nights I sat in the dark wondering who I'd become. I laid them all out on the floor, read every single one, and I started writing again, but this time with intention. I bought a hardbound journal, leather cover, thick pages. I titled it Inheritance, not because of money, but because I wanted my children to inherit something more valuable. The truth, my truth. Every morning for 2 months, I wrote, not just about the betrayal, but about everything. The early days, the dreams, the mistakes, the things I should have said and didn't, the things I regret, the things I'm proud of. I wrote about how I used to love mornings with Jacob, how he'd bring me coffee and kiss my forehead like I was something sacred. I wrote about the first time I caught him lying and told myself it didn't matter. I wrote about Marlene's overdoses, her tears, the way I held her hair back and whispered, "It's not your fault," even when I knew it was. I didn't write to shame them. I wrote so I wouldn't forget myself. At the end of the journal, I wrote letters to each of my children. Michael, Eli, Abigail. I told them the truth about what happened, about what I saw, about why I waited, and how I knew the moment to act had finally come. I didn't blame them. I didn't ask them to hate anyone. I just asked them to understand. Each letter ended with the same sentence. If you ever doubt who I am, read this again. Then I made a decision. I rewrote my will. Everything, every property, every account, every trust remained in place. But with one condition, none of them could access their inheritance unless they read Inheritance, the full journal. Cover to cover. No shortcuts, no summaries. The lawyer and I even arranged a clause that required them to sign a notarized statement, confirming they had read it fully and privately. It was the only way I knew to ensure that my truth wouldn't die with me. The journal now sits in a wooden box in my personal safe, alongside the flash drive, the letters, and the original birth certificate that changed everything. Yes, there's something else, something I hadn't told anyone. A secret that came out during a moment of curiosity, a DNA test Abigail begged me to take one Christmas. One of those kits everyone was playing with. Just for fun, she said. We sent it in, got our results. Mine came back, expected, Irish roots, Scottish, a little German. But Abigail's didn't match completely. Only partially. I thought it was a mistake. But after 3 tests and quiet consultations, it became clear. Jacob wasn't her biological father. And that broke something in me. Not because of biology. I loved her with every inch of my soul. She was mine. Always would be. But it meant the lie went deeper than I thought. The affair wasn't a moment. It wasn't even years. It was an alternate life. A second story playing out behind my back. I never told Abigail. Not yet. I didn't want to take away the man she still thought of as her father. Not before she was ready. But it's in the journal. The full story. The timing. The test results. The letter from the lab. The moment I opened the envelope and sat in the garden for 4 hours unable to move. I didn't scream that day either. I just breathed. And wrote. And watched the sky shift into dusk. Because some betrayals are so big, so complete, they don't need noise. They just need truth. And the truth is, I survived all of it. It started with the doorbell. A quiet Sunday morning, the sun barely touching the windows, and I was still in my robe sipping coffee. I opened the door expecting a delivery, or maybe Abigail home for the weekend again. But instead, there she stood, Marlene. A duffel bag slung over one shoulder, eyes, puffy lips, chapped hair, unbrushed, and wild. She looked like a woman who had nowhere left to go. I didn't say a word. She didn't either. We just stood there in silence, the kind thick enough to chew. Then she said, I didn't know where else to go. I didn't nod, didn't gesture. I just stepped aside. Not because I was ready to forgive, not because I missed her, but because something in me, some piece I hadn't buried deep enough, still needed to see her ruined. She dropped the bag inside the hallway, looked around like she expected it all to still be hers. But everything had changed. The living room was different. Walls painted, furniture rearranged. The house no longer bent to her memory. It bent to mine. I lost the apartment, she said quietly, standing in the doorway like a child waiting for scolding. I lost everything. I didn't offer sympathy. Instead, I said, sit down. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Same one we'd sat at 100 times, laughing, whispering, planning. Only now it was heavy with history. She reached for the mug in front of her coffee I had made instinctively. She took a sip, winced. You still take it black. I didn't answer. She stared at the table. He left me, after everything, said he couldn't look at me without feeling guilt. I said nothing, and I guess I thought. She looked up at me, then eyes, glassy lips trembling. I guess I thought you might still be the one person who wouldn't walk away. You didn't walk away from me, Marlene? I said calmly. You ripped me in half and stayed to watch me bleed. She blinked. Her mouth twitched. I know I did. The silence stretched again. I didn't come for a handout, she said. I just needed to say it. To say what? That I'm sorry. I stared at her, this woman I had once cradled through withdrawals, who had borrowed my sweaters, slept in my guest house, called me her lifeline, and stole the one man who was supposed to be loyal to me when I was at my most vulnerable. I took a breath. You didn't just sleep with him. You stole years of my life, You made jokes behind my back. You watched me raise his children while you kept a second version of him hidden. I didn't mean for it to happen. That doesn't matter anymore." Tears slid down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them. "I'm not here to make it right," she whispered. "I know I can't. Then why are you here? Because I don't know who I am anymore." I stood up, took her empty mug, placed it in the sink. Then I said, "You'll have to figure that out without me." She looked up confused. "You're not going to let me stay?" "No, Grace. You burned this bridge years ago. You're just finally choking on the smoke." She stood, her bag still by the door. She didn't make a scene, didn't beg, just nodded slowly. "I guess I deserved that." "You deserve more than that," I said. "But I'm not in the business of revenge anymore. I'm in the business of peace." She hesitated. "Will you ever forgive me? I didn't lie." "I don't know." She nodded again, opened the door, and walked out without another word. That was the last time I saw her. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived, postmarked from Nevada. It was from her. A note. No apology. Just a thank you for being the only person who ever loved me, even when I didn't deserve it. I folded it, slipped it into the back of the inheritance journal. A final chapter that would never be read by the children, but one I needed to close for myself. As for Jacob, I learned through Eli that he had moved out of state. Started some new consulting job. Apparently he lives in a small apartment, sees no one regularly, and sends birthday texts that go unanswered. Good. The children processed the truth in their own ways. Michael called and said, "I don't know what to say." I said, "You don't have to." He cried. So did I. Eli brought flowers, sat on the porch, didn't say much. But he stayed for hours. Abigail read the journal. All of it. She came over after, no questions, just held my hand and said, "You're the strongest person I know." That meant more than anything. I started living again. Really living. I took a ceramics class, burned the first bowl, glazed the second one gold. I learned to sleep diagonally in the bed. I adopted a dog, named him Henry. He's lazy and warm, and follows me around like he's afraid I'll disappear. I made new friends, started hosting small dinners, lit candles without waiting for an occasion. I learned to laugh again. Real belly-deep laughter that didn't come from pretending. Sometimes I even dance in the kitchen, alone, with the music up and no one watching. Because freedom isn't loud, it's simple, it's soft, and I earned it, every second of it. I sat in the lawyer's office with the sun pouring through the tall windows, casting lines across the hardwood floors, like a soft reminder that time keeps moving, whether we're ready or not. The will had already been drafted, the trusts finalized, the papers reviewed more times than I could count. All that was left was a signature. And the sealing of my final act. The estate was worth more than I realized. Years of investments, property appreciation, inheritance from my grandmother, retirement accounts that kept growing even as life unraveled. I had always managed things quietly, carefully. That was one of the gifts I carried. Even in the chaos, I paid attention. Each child had their trust now. Separate. Protected. But each with one binding clause before a dollar could transfer, before a deed could change hands or an account could be touched. They had to read inheritance. My journal. The record of my truth. My pain. My quiet revenge. My healing. I told Randall, the attorney, I don't care if it takes them years. I just want them to know who I really was, what I really survived. He nodded. They will, one way or another. I signed the final page, watched the notary seal it. It felt anticlimactic, but also somehow like exhaling a breath I'd been holding for decades. Afterward, I went home, sat in the garden. The tomatoes were finally showing green. The basil had flourished. Henry laid beside me, panting softly, his chin resting on my bare foot. I closed my eyes and let the sun rest on my face. Peace wasn't a feeling. It was a decision I'd made again and again when I chose not to destroy them the way they had destroyed me. But I didn't leave them untouched. I left them truth. That night, I walked into the guest house now converted into my private library and writing space. Clean, white shelves, soft lighting, a velvet chair that held my body like it remembered me before the world broke me. I opened the journal one last time, page by page, rereading every line, every crack. Every moment I documented as if preserving a body for burial. I reached the end, where the letter from the lab was pasted, where the photos sat, the texts, the time-stamped receipts, the truth about Abigail's DNA, the birth date, the shift in Jacob's behavior, the night that tied everything together like a noose. I had once planned to confront them with all of it, but now I didn't need to. They'd find out in time. One day, long after I was gone, Abigail would read the lab report. And I knew my daughter well enough to know this, she'd understand. She wouldn't hate him, but she'd know. And with knowing comes power. I also left behind a sealed envelope taped to the back of the journal. Inside was a separate deed. One no one knew existed. You see, years ago, back when I started plotting in silence, I had transferred the title of the lake house to a private trust, but not under my name. I put it in Abigail's, quietly, irrevocably, with full legal authority. She didn't know it yet, but when the time came, she'd discover it. And in that moment, she'd realize something deeper than anything I could say aloud. I had always chosen her, even when her bloodline was a lie, even when her name no longer matched mine in every cell. She was my daughter. She was the only innocent one in the whole tangled story, and I had made sure she would be safe, that she would inherit not just property, but power. The next morning, I sat down and wrote one final letter. To no one. To everyone. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But don't be sad. My life didn't end in betrayal. It ended in truth. I didn't die broken. I died whole. Not because they gave me closure, but because I gave it to myself. And to you. I tucked it inside the front cover of the journal. Then closed the book for the last time. Later that week, I had my locks changed again. Not for security, for peace. A symbolic act. A final one. Because no one else had a key to my life anymore. I had reclaimed it, fully. Finally. And I slept that night like a woman who had returned to herself. No shadows in the hallway. No phone buzzes at 2 a.m. No need to wonder where they were or what they were whispering. Just me, and the wind, and the sound of something very old finally being laid to rest. It was a Thursday when I walked down to the beach. The air was soft, cool, the kind of summer day that doesn't burn, but holds you gently. I wore a light jacket over my shoulders, my hair pulled back pearl earrings that had once belonged to my mother. The sky was streaked with amber and pale gold, the tide low, revealing long strips of sand that looked like untouched memory. In my hands, I held the phone. I had recorded the story. Every word, every chapter, every truth. Not for likes, not for views, but because it was time. Time to let the silence finally speak. The recording was long, over an hour. My voice low, calm, steady like the woman I had finally become. I told everything. The betrayal, the wine glasses, the flash drive, the will, the DNA. The moment I realized that even love when abused becomes rot. I looked out at the ocean and whispered to no one, I am not a victim. I am not a survivor. I am simply free. Then I hit publish. The story was live. no longer trapped in journals or folded into wills. Out in the world where it could be heard, where someone else sitting on a cold kitchen floor could realize they weren't alone, that there is life after loss, power after pain, and peace on the other side of being erased. I stood there for a while, let the breeze move through me. Then I walked home. The house looked different now. Not because I'd redecorated, but because it was no longer built on a lie. Every wall had heard the truth. Every room held my voice now, not theirs. Inside, a small stack of mail waited on the table. Among them, a letter addressed in Abigail's handwriting. I opened it. Mom. I finished the journal. All of it. I cried. I laughed. I sat in silence for hours. I can't believe how much you carried alone, how much strength you wrapped in quiet. I want you to know something. I don't care what the DNA says. You are my mother. You are my compass. You are the reason I believe in kindness and grit and starting over. I love you more than words can carry, and I will carry your truth. Always. I sat down, held the letter close to my chest, closed my eyes. That was the moment I knew I didn't need forgiveness. Not from them. Not from myself. I had already built my own redemption. Not from vengeance, but from knowing I never stopped loving the people who betrayed me. I just finally stopped doing it at the cost of myself. And they would never know peace the way I had found it, because they would never get to hear the rest of the story. The part where I turned my silence into freedom. The part where I owned everything they thought I would lose. The part where I stood on the beach with the sun on my face and not a single lie left in my life. They thought they broke me, but I was never made of glass. I was stone, warmed by time, smoothed by truth, and in the end, I was still standing, still smiling, still mine.